way that companies would refer to a product would be to focus on a product, make a really, really good product, and then bring it to the market. Today, we have a little different perspective, but sometimes, if you make a really good product and you bring it to the market, you realize that no one actually needs this product. So user experience engineering is asking, who is your customer? Who is your user? And focusing on that user, what do they need? And how can I design something for that user specifically? And that is basically the user experience engineer job, is engineering an experience for the user, is finding who is the user and what can we do for the user and how. So I'm going to start with a few examples, again, about what is UX. I'm sure some of you already know. So just any questions?
Could you just briefly present what you are doing, because not all of us know.
Okay. Keith, do you want to present yourself? Okay, so my name is Shalhavit-Simcha Cohen. I just graduated a master's at Harvard University of Digital Media Design. I'm currently a user experience engineer. I work with different companies to empower them specifically in learning design. So I'm gonna present here 3 of my recent projects and what we learned from them, and reach the specific ones that could maybe help Tel Aviv University. It's an open source, so you'll be able to use it as well if you like. So I'm going to start with examples of what user experience is not. Can you tell me what's wrong with this experience? Great. Those little tabs on top of our laptop, no one uses them anymore. It's the stairway, the cans. So, and these are it's a floor cleaner. Kind of looks like a soda.
It happened actually.
That's a bit of
It happened.
Giraffe, the restaurant.
No.
The bleach and lemon juice, lemonade. They did exactly the same.
3 people
Three
ended up in the hospital.
Wow. Wow. So,
It's a good example.
and the remote control, you have the good user experience and the bad user experience. I don't even need to point. Elevators, the way that the numbers are organized. We see that everywhere we go in today's life. So very often, my professor at Harvard usually says, if you feel like something is not working for you, it might not be your fault. It might just be a bad design. Sometimes you get those messages on the computer. Green stop, the red start. Where do we go in the rooms? An interesting bathroom experience. So this is an example for a good user experience, right? You have the faces, you have the question, but the claim is that if you want a good user experience, you want it to not even be felt. So you could ask that question and put the faces, but you could also just do this, right? And people are going to know exactly what the question and exactly what this means. So there's always a way to improve. The 3 to 5 second rule, which you may know, when we open an app, when we look at a website, we have between 3 to 5 seconds to decide what it's about and if we want to stay there. And that's true for the first impression. And I want
app and also a video. That's the same.
Yeah, we have. If you open, I remember I was on this huge cliff in the Moor Cliffs in Europe. There are these huge cliffs that are part of, I think, one of these epic scenes in a movie, and I take a picture at the cliff, and I just walk towards the cliff and look down, and it's really epic. But none of my friends actually looked at it because the first 5 seconds I'm actually just walking towards it. And you have those just 3 seconds to decide if you're going to continue with the video or not. And same thing with Dan Gilbert from Harvard University studies psychology, and he says that we remember how an experience ends. So the first impression is as important as the last impression. How you end something is how the user is going to feel it. We have it also in medical experiments where you have an operation that could be very painful. If you finish the operation right when it ends, it's very painful, and the patient probably would not want to experience it again. But if you elongate the pain just a little bit longer, so you experience more pain, but you kind of slowly decrease it, the patient will remember it as a very small amount of pain. We'll remember the end of the experiences as well as the beginning of the experiences. A few examples of websites. We all know these websites. What do you think of the Dropbox experience?
We're using your eyes, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
Especially I don't like it.
You don't like, what do you not like it?
I don't like it. It's too complicated most of the times. It's I don't know if it's on my computer, if it's on a friend's computer. Sometimes people can put files on my Dropbox, but then they'll get like a note that their drive is full.
Yeah.
It's very complicated in that
So-
sense.
So even Dropbox that are like made is not doing great. Even look at their design. They have the sign up and the sign in using the same word, sign in, sign up. Usually want to use maybe register
Right.
instead of sign up, for example. Facebook has a little bit better. What do you think of this one? Right, you know where to search right away. This is this is the art department of Princeton University. Okay, would you want to go to this department? I don't know. Okay, a popular website, but you can see the design is very well thought about. Apple, what do you think of their website? I think so. A lot of people think it's perfect, but they're also focused on a very specific user. You see on the top, there are a lot of categories. Right? The younger generation still doesn't like a lot of categories. They maybe want to have a few lines that's for the menu, and then they could find. But it could be that Apple does their research, finding who is their specific user. It could be of a certain age, and that's the design that works for their user. So if you see yes.
So, you mean that the younger generation prefers cascading menus, like 2 categories that open up to 3
So-
more?
So they're different. We're going to get to the younger. We're talking about teenagers, 16, and then there's 20s and there's 30s. So those are all different demographics. So this could be probably 20s, 30s. I'm going to share with you a research of 16-year-olds that I did a few months ago in Boston. So this is the website for selling.
These
In the 70s.
It's a modern website. What do you think of the Ynet website? Yeah,
I don't like their website,
right.
but their app is better.
Right. So from the user designer as a web page, this looks way too full. There's so many categories on top, way too long to read everything. But I didn't put here, but the New York Times is actually not that different. A lot of newspapers prefer to have their presentation the same way that the newspaper looks like. So the newspaper is very full of information. So often newspaper sites would just prefer to have it as a newspaper. So it really depends who's the user and how do you want to design for a specific user. What do you guys think about this one?
This page is actually not that bad, I think, but
The next one.
the overall
Yeah,
site is horrible.
Oh, I didn't get to the next one. A quick note, the Harvard page, which is very similar, you don't actually need to put the username. We just have the ID and password. I don't know if it's necessary to have the third, but overall it is very clean and easy to look at. When you want to present an information and a photo together with the information, it's usually not a good idea to add that the photo is going to be exactly the same as the word. So if I want to say questions and put a question mark, it's redundant. It's using the same picture of what you're trying to say. Some people would make the question mark a little bit prettier, for a little cute person thinking, oh, questions. But often what we try to do is try to have a photo that adds more information from what we're saying or from what's written. This is one of the cards that we presented. We're talking about questions, and we want to encourage students to ask questions. So we said, well, we tried to show the student is too shy to ask.
I remember when I learned psychology that one of the things is that cognitive point of view, it's better to see something and additionally to read it the same, to read and to see the same thing, and that way that the input gets much better to our brain that's a research I remember from my studies a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, is that like scientific? Do you have any?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that from what I learned, it's important to bring more information, and maybe it's more of a modern theory, but it could be also a demographic that you're aiming at. So it could be that if you want to talk to a 50-year-old and you want to show them a picture, maybe the picture should be repeating. I know that what we try to, and my department at Harvard, we try to have pictures that add information. So it could be, I'm giving you rules that we studied and that's what we found works, but it's not always the finite rule.
I think that the amount of adding is also important because in some of our courses, the additional information was too long. So it was like looking at the picture, the lecturer is still continuing to speak in the video, but you're still trying to understand what does this picture
have to do with it.
And it's too much information, and I think the amount is important, so it works.
I speak from a UX point of view, and you're probably more about how to learn stuff better or remember.
That we're talking about the same thing, I guess.
Yeah.
About learning experience.
No, I'd say actually the opposite. In UX, you probably want things to be more like simplistic and intuitive, and not to overload the user with many graphic elements. But when you want to study better,
To plan something.
Yeah, to plan something in your mind, you want like different kind of
Attention.
yeah, like the picture can help you
Internalize
the material better.
Yeah.
And there's also a thin line between disruption for the learner to attention.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, maybe I would focus on the picture of the lips.
Yeah.
That's me, I'm older. And I won't even read the text, so it's...
So these are for cards. So
It
those are
wouldn't
not.
necessarily work on video, for instance, but I think
Cards.
it's very eye-catching, and
Yeah.
you're intrigued to look
So look at
more
the card.
and
We tried to make the
find out.
cards.
Yeah.
So this is so these are actually a beta of the first picture, which was questions and a question mark, and they had connections with a picture of an envelope. And I wanted to add more information, and so the head of the department, we had this conversation, but we're making another iteration. So this was actually
Which will be?
we're working on it right now.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you the current iteration, and again, it's going to be open source. So you could get it yourself. Who knows what word makes the most money online? Gets the most attention.
Money?
Money.
Discount?
Sex.
Free?
Free. So if you put that word in the title of your email or in the first line of your email, it's gonna make the person want to open it more. Also in the title of the website or the first thing that you see. It's one word that makes the person more likely to open it and eventually also buy your product. So the word is
You.
You.
Yeah, you.
the word is you. And that's really what user experience. You.
You.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get a better life. You can learn to do this. So the word you and words that imply you. So do this or the action words. And often questions would also be more intriguing than just a statement. So can you do this? Can you do this? Actually, it's not the best. So how can you do this? Open-ended questions are better than yes/no questions. Because yes/no is like, oh, can you do this? Yes, I can. I move on. Or how do you like to? I don't remember the first thing I asked. How do you like? Or I forgot what it was, but I put the you and I was asking, what is your user experience? What is your experience when you see something? It makes you more interested. And the user experience is really all about you. It's all about the person that you're talking to. I could go on and quote Dale Carnegie from How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's a whole book. It's a bestseller of all times. Where the whole book is talking about how if you try to sell something, you don't talk about what you're good at. you talk about what you, like you talk to the you talk to the user, and how can I help you. So I gave a little bit about what UX is. I'm going to move to a little bit of my research on online education, and my first would be the course that I was working with at edX and MIT. It was one of the most popular courses on edX. It's called Entrepreneurship 101, or Who is Your Customer? So very similar to the UX field. We were a group of 5, and it was an experimental team. So MIT had several experimental teams on campus. My colleague was Mike McGurk. He was one of the assistant productions of the movie Ted with the little bear. So we had very open-minded people, and we had we put videos where we took the lecturer, we took him to the basketball court and talked about how he was as a kid and how he grew up believing in himself and failing, and we tried to make it more epic. We put a little bit of animation, and so we made the course more lively because it was we had the freedom to use different elements that we wanted to put in and make it more colorful. Because it was so popular, the president of MIT, Raphael Reif, targeted our course, and he asked us if we could do an experiment in blended learning and tell the students that they could have an option of coming to MIT. So we sent an email to the 56,000 students that registered and said, hey, you can come to MIT and meet the professor, and it's going to be great. My boss, Erdine, didn't have time to focus on it. We were busy in production, so I said, Shalhavit, you're a people person, you do this. And I couldn't interview. We had 500 full applications that came in. I can't do phone interviews with 500 people. We brought a colleague from China, Chichu, and an intern, Mi Young, and we started interviewing people. We interviewed about 200 people from the applicants, and eventually we had 59 people came from 24 different countries, but the process of interviewing 200 people of our users and the most passionate users was perfect for the user experience research. We found elements that categorized who is our persona, and eventually I hung a picture of 3 of our personas of the users that identify most of our personas, and when our designers were working, they're thinking, so one of them was Samit. He was 19 years old. He's from India. He walks every day to school. On his way to school, he listens to some lectures. On the way back, he listens to lectures. And so we tried to start targeting our user. And we found, for example, that a lot of them were the oldest in their family. A lot of them like to read historic novels. So it was interesting to find a persona and really design our course for the persona. And by the way, the seminar that we did was very similar to Birthright, because when I was in Israel, I did Birthright groups. So it was like a Birthright based on a course. And it's still running. It makes a lot of money for MIT, and I'm happy to share more about it. It's one of the first courses on edX that's making a big revenue now just from the online course, because they made the accelerator based on this. The second research I want to tell you about is Prepify. Prepify is an MIT Sloan School, business school. Students can decide to make an app. It's a free app currently online called Prepify.me, and it's a free app for teenagers for preparing for their SAT exams. The SAT exams are exams that you take before in order to get into university in the US. And the Prepify.me is an app basically that's aggregator of a lot of practices and information to get into school. It's a free app, and it's a very pretty design. And I basically met the team after they designed it. They put it out on the market, and it's free, and it's got great information, but not a lot of users actually used it. So that's why I met the team, and I was like, hey, did you actually go out and talk to the users, find out who they are? No, they did not. Mm-hmm. And so for a few months, I would send blast emails to all their people who registered and aren't using the app. I found that teenagers don't really want to talk on the phone. Even if you give them $5 or $10 for Starbucks, they still won't want a 5-minute phone call. My next step was going into projects for teenage projects. So a place where teenagers already are, I told them, hey, I'm going to give you a free class on UX and how they can make their projects better. A lot of them were making different video projects. And then I asked them, to give me feedback. I went to projects and I went to high schools, where again I told the teachers, hey, I'll give you a free class from someone in the business in the industry, and then at the end of the class I introduced Prepify and I brought up a few of the students and did a live demo on how a user experience engineer talks to a student, to a user. So I brought a student and asked, tell us about your life. What do you do when you wake up? You eat breakfast. What do you have for breakfast? What do you do when you go to school? What do you do with your phone? When do you interact with your phone? And what are the apps that you usually interact with? What are the apps that you enjoy interacting with? Some interesting things were one of the most popular apps for the 16-year-olds were Duolingo for studying languages. They love it, partially because it's so interactive. You open the app.
Gamified.
It's gamified.
It's very gamified. It's really fun with the flower growing and every answer that you respond to. If you don't know, you plug in an answer and there's a little stem, and another answer and there's a leaf, and then another leaf, and finally flowers. It's really fun. And another thing I learned is in school they mostly use Khan Academy, and the schools in Cambridge and in Boston. So now that I know that they use a lot of Khan Academy, I know to maybe design something and that they use a lot of Duolingo. Even if I don't think Khan Academy is the best, I might want to make something similar because they have the patterns. And that's what we learn a lot also about online courses. If you make a pattern, that the students are used to, they'd like to follow the same pattern. One of the very important questions that I ended with is, what do you want to see when you first open up? What's the first impression that you want? What do you want to see when you first open the app? What would call you to stay? A lot of the answers were, I want to right away see an example. It's an app for practicing. I want to right away to see an example question. And that's going to make me stay. Very much like Duolingo, right? It's a right away question, I respond. It's very interactive. I need to respond in order to move on. So this is currently the beta plan. It's slightly better, but again, there's a lot of white text. I let the student, I'm just giving you examples of what it was. They're currently starting to work on the next version. A student clicks on one of this information features with already big white boxes with text, and they get this lot of text to read, right? And you see the student and all the friends are watching him, and he's like, I basically asked him to play with the app and think out loud, right? So you see a student sitting there and he's clicking and he's like, oh my gosh, so much text, I don't want to read this, I'm going to the next one. And you learn from that this is not how you want to design this. The last example I want to tell you about is my research on the Harvard Learning Management System, LMS, Learning Management System. And so we use Canvas. A lot of universities currently use the Canvas. If you can see, the Harvard key is very similar to the Tel Aviv University. It's also Harvard, my Harvard, right? So the Harvard Learning Management System, my experiment, turn it off so you could, the learning team, the learning designers at the Harvard Pedagogic Office asked me to go, and we had a grant specifically for this, and I went to the different learning designers at the different schools. So Harvard has a lot of schools. I know Harvard, it's probably the same. There's the Harvard Medical School, the Harvard Business School, the Harvard Kennedy School of Leadership. And I went to the different groups of designers, of learning designers, and asked them, what are the most popular courses? What are the most successful courses? And what do you think makes them the most successful? So there is, for example, the round table structure where the lecturer makes the student participate a lot. I got a lot of information from the learning designers of the different schools, and then I went to talk to the students. And I asked the students, from random students that I was able to reach, what were you, from different schools, what were the best experiences for you on the course? I'm going to show you the background of the questions that I asked them. You don't have to read it, it's going to be lots of text. But just to show you the behind of the scenes, if I showed this as a slide, this is bad UX. This is not a slide. This is just to show them the Excel sheet that I eventually gave my team. But I basically got the name of the student and some questions that I asked them about their interaction with the lecturer, how do they feel they interact with the students around them. Should I leave it on? I think it's just a little bit bothersome. Okay, so I asked them what was their interaction with the students and how did they feel like they learned from other students too, or from, basically asked them open-ended questions on the connectivity with the lecturer, and how did they feel in the class? Did they feel like they know what's happening? Did they feel like they know what the assignment is? And I got a lot of feedback from students. And the last, if you could see the different categories. So I asked for instructors, learning designers, students, And eventually I met instructors and asked the instructors, what can we do for them? What is their experience? And what are the difficulties for the instructors? How can we give them the tips that we learned? First of all, what make their courses better, but also how can we help them make their courses better? And so we ended up with 5 categories of information, of different tips that could make your class better, of how to manage expectations better in your class, and how to encourage questions, and how to encourage interaction between the students, and what's the best size of groups. They're still debating between 3 and 8. So the medical school at Harvard are still experimenting with that because they have like entire degrees that are mostly online for doctors and postdoctors that just want to increase in knowledge. So a lot of online courses that they want to find, a lot of group work. And the end result of all these tips, I came back to my team. To be honest, that all the information on the Excel sheet, some of them didn't even read the whole thing. So even the designers don't want to read so much. They just wanted to hear from me, what are the main things that I learned? And they also interact with instructors all the time and TAs, and they had also the questions that they're asked very often. And together we put that into 5 categories. Each category had a bunch of tips. And we finished the research for now. And they're like, okay, well, the grant that we got is for making a website. And I was like, wow, great. Do we know if instructors actually want to open another page to click on another page to read a website that has a list of tips? So the answer was probably not. And they tried to make the tips into myths and facts. So it's fun, myths and facts. But again, I met the instructors after. We have instructor night. So it's once a year. Harvard brings the instructors for instructor night. They kind of help them prepare. A lot of new instructors. How do I make a course? It's a whole night it's a seminar. And instructors basically don't want to click on another page. So my experiment was making these cards. I basically took all the tips and I turned them into 5 series of cards. So each category had subcategories. Each subcategory is a card. I'll share with you if you could pass it around just to take a look. And I want to share with you some of the information. Obviously, they're all here on the cards, and it's open source. We're going to work on the beta. This is the first one. I showed it to instructors on Instructor Night this year. A lot of instructors really enjoyed it. They said it's just fun. The goal of these cards is to put them as a pile for where instructors come and wait before they get feedback, before they get help, and during instructor nights and instructor events, just because they're colorful and it's fun to hold to their index cards. Mm-hmm. Side story, last year I dated a restaurant consultant. So we went to a lot of restaurants all the time. And sometimes it was free, and we'd look around the restaurant and be like, oh, they need to put the dessert in the front so people would know that they were thinking about dessert soon, right? It's the first impression. Very similar things. And we often looked at the menu. Menus at restaurants could be horrible sometimes. A lot of text, no pictures. And we got to this one restaurant in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and there were little index card sides with a photo of the dish and a little description with the price, and you could read a little bit more in the back. And he went crazy to just ask the waiter to try and find the manager, and the manager had to call the owner, the CEO of the company, just because he wanted to buy a few sets of these cards to show in other restaurants where he gives consulting to, mostly in London and in the UK. And so that's what made me think of doing the hand-sized cards, the index cards. So you could pass them around, take a look at, or you could each one take a card and just read it for fun. And
is there an online version for the cards?
So the cards are all based on the website. The website has the 5 categories, and each category has the subcategories, and the cards are basically the subcategories.
Can you later on share with us the website?
Yes.
And maybe pictures of it?
Yeah. So it's all open source.
Yeah.
Right now, I'll share with you the originals if you actually want to order them as cards. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can take a look. I wanted to share some of the information from the cards. So if you have, I'll show with you. So the expectations card, I showed you these my most favorite cards. These are my lesser favorite cards. And even with these cards, we're working on the beta, right? For example, this guy doesn't have a shirt on. I thought it was cool. Harvard did not think it was so cool. Some instructors really liked it, but because Harvard is suit and tie, they don't want to have this kind of skater boy on the card. I thought it was fun, but again, I am not my user. My user is an instructor. The instructors are usually older. So there's always more to learn. And in terms of text, making the text shorter, but we still want to provide information. Trying to think, how can you make a game out of this? So I'll just give a few examples of things that are in a card. For example, expectations. Do you have the expectations card somewhere over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to read the back?
Time-saving tip: you can publish your models in advance, but keep them marked so students can only see the titles of each item. Keep reading. Then you can set it to auto unlock on a certain date, so you don't have to worry about forgetting to open it on time.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice.
That's like a very short tip. I think I was looking for the other one, the other expectation. Yeah, oh, you got the other one. Oh,
That's
Mhm.
the help students know to do and when to do it.
Yeah.
That's the one. Okay. Students often feel nervous that they are missing something, especially if they're online students. You can help by organizing your materials and activities into weekly units where students can find everything they need. Use Canvas models to create units for each week of your course. There you can add files, assignments, discussions, quizzes, links, and any other content you'd like to put on the page. Check out the following card, time-saving tip.
Okay. So the time saving tip of this card, so I think it's the third one, but the expectations is one of the big things, I think. And they create different tips about expectations in the cards, where students often feel, I was sharing, one of you just 2 minutes ago, that, I don't remember if it was ST Leo, anyway, it was that you come to class, and I remember a computer science course I was a student at, and the second class in, I turned around, like this one line, I asked about this one line, and she was like, I didn't understand the entire class. And I asked the next guy in the second class already, and everyone's lost, but no one feels safe to say, because no one wants to be the one who, no one wants to appear dumb. So Encourage Inquiry has different tips for that. We found, for example, that if the students create their own Facebook group that's private and the instructors can't go in, they feel safe to share that they actually don't understand things. So we find it actually more beneficial when they manage their own group. Sometimes we have a ghost student, which would be one of us. And so it'd be interesting for getting feedback. Managing expectations is one of the big things where if you're one instructor and you have 200 students with no TA, one of the best responses for students of classes that they really enjoyed is when they send a question and they get right away an answer. And that means that your TA doesn't have a life, or your instructor, because you're constantly responding to questions. But what you could do as an instructor is say at the beginning, hey, I want to tell you the expectations for this class. And I'm going to also repeat it every week. So I'm going to say this over and over. So repeating is great. And creating pattern, right? So having the students know what's happening, know what to expect, and tell them, listen, I'm one, you guys are 200, and I can't read all your emails all the time. But you should know that I only read my emails on Sunday evenings between 6 to midnight. And so everyone knows that by Monday morning, they're going to get a response. And as an instructor, I also say, listen, because there's so many of you, if you don't get a response, it's probably because your question is repeating with other people, and I'm going to put it on the discussion board. And every week at the beginning of the course, I'm going to remind everyone, check the discussion board. That's a question that repeated itself. So creating that consistency and managing the expectations is one of the big things. I was also telling ST Lee before how the human element is a very huge part, that the online courses need some sort of human element. So even if we have one meeting throughout the semester with a TA, it changes the entire feeling for the students. Having one meeting on Skype, if it's an online course, we have students from all around the world, one meeting for 10-15 minutes of questions, just checking in, just knowing that there's a human on the other side changes the feeling both for the students and the TA. Knowing that there's the other person really changes the experience. I know as being a TA, the course I was working on, we started using a lot of those tips, and it was really fascinating. So these are a few examples. I wanted to open the floor for questions and answers. These are also, right now, also a prototype. So there might be several iterations until we have the final cards. A lot of instructors just wanted to order right away the full set. So they'll just have it on the desk and sometimes just open.
Can you elaborate on the method that you used with the cards? I mean, they were sitting in groups, they were looking independently. How was?
So I just actually put them on the table. They were kind of scattered like this.
Yeah.
And instructors came and they're like, oh, card, huh? And they just look and they're like, interesting, I want this one. And they look at the subtitles. And so I actually didn't really, I'm not a game user. I do play with Google Maps a little bit, but so everyone's a game user. But I didn't really think before on how to design a game from it. My mom has tarot cards all over her house. So she always kind of opens a card and she's like, ooh.
You gotta get married. Yeah.
So that was
A cup of coffee next to you.
Yeah, but the instructors said that they could use it. I asked them, what do they think that, because again, this was not asking the instructors, do you want cards? We just had 2 weeks. I wanted to make something more interesting than this website. I learned how to use Photoshop. I'm more of a video designer. And I asked the instructors, is this helpful or what could be more helpful? We thought of putting signs in the bathroom, but a lot of instructors don't actually come to the office. They work from home. So trying to find ways to engage with them more. Some people thought of pop-ups that come up while they use our learning management system. Those could be annoying. Some of the instructors said that they would like to have the TAs have to go through a preparation course, so the TA would know a lot of this information ahead of time. Because the TAs are the ones who actually manage the course at Harvard for a lot of the instructors. So again, I'd love to hear your feedback too, but I wanted to open the floor for questions now, in the time we have.
I have one feedback. You mentioned your mother, so my sister is a doula, and my mother is a painter, so she also did cards like, I don't know what's the name of the cards, like cards that just open conversation about all kinds of things, happiness, sadness, lots of emotions, and my mother drew the pictures for every. It's like a mandala.
Mandala, yeah.
Mandala. Everyone has like different kind of elements inside. So I think sometimes pictures just a little bit too.
Specific.
Too specific for maybe just drawings can say different things to different people and open more conversation.
More like shapes.
Yeah, shapes of things maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Yeah, if you know the point of view cards. Do you know that?
Sounds familiar, remind me.
They work in the same way. They have a very meaningful word on the front. But the pictures usually are very symbolic, like a shoe or a doll or things that are. They usually have a lot of contrast, like a doll with ashes on her a bit. It's like makes you wonder.
Yeah.
So it's more symbolic than specific, and it allows you to להשליך. Project your feelings on it without really.
Right.
Yeah.
More like the lips. The lips are like just the best example from those.
Dan, by the way, some of those cards are the too long cards, right? So some of them, I tried to make them shorter, but the team was like, no, you have to put the entire text. So like you get something like this.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to show this yet. So we're working on the data.
But I think it's okay because you're engaged. You decided to take a card, so you're already there with your attention and you want to read it.
Yeah.
You did the effort, so don't put it down to me.
Yeah, I'm thinking also from when I design a video with text, I put one bold sentence, kind of like in an article. So having maybe that.
So that will engage a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Tali said you have different questions about the pedagogic structures and how do we bring changes.
Yeah, I guess that if you can, you mentioned that there were 5 categories that you mapped. So I think you shared with us 3, and we can read, but
oh, my bad.
Present the 5 categories.
Yeah.
While designing the online courses, we think about many of the mentioned things. some of us are already it takes place on MOOCs because the weekly division of the content and having quizzes and discussions and time frame for the course is a given thing. But I think there's much more to learn. So
so the 5 categories that we chose, again, we brainstormed for a long time what would be the categories and what goes under what category.
Mm-hmm.
So there was questions, encouraging inquiry, expectations, plan a smooth experience. I spoke about a lot. I spoke about these two, I guess, a lot. Connections, how to reach your students. Feedback, respond to student work. So there's a lot with feedback and online feedback and what was the last one? Community, right? Fostering peer connection. Often, I know that's the case in the U.S. And I'm assuming it's probably the same in Israel. Students come to university when it's in physical form. A lot of what they get is actually from their peers. A lot of their big memories are from what they learned from the peers. And I had a lot of questions actually asking students, what did you gain from different classes? And often it would be what they learned from their friends. And one of the myths actually was that you make better connections in small classes, which was not always true. So often in a small class, every student has their assignment, which is great. You have a round table discussion. But I have my assignment, I go home, I come back and present it. In large, massive classes with more than 200 students, you feel lost. You create a little group of friends, and sometimes those friends stick with you for life. But on the advanced and graduate classes, in some undergrad, you get a lot of information from your peers because often your peers are working in the field. So it's both helpful for the professor at the Harvard Business School. The faculty actually gets the information on each student, and we encourage the students to build a profile, have the picture. But they have an amazing management system for the business school. They have more money. But the professor could actually type a title like Iran war industry. And it's going to find the student that has it somewhere in the resume. And the faculty would know to call that student in class or even before class to share some of what they know. So a lot of the information that you get in university is often from your peers because you are in a place in academia where other people are in a similar place to you, and they're all going to be in the future your colleagues. And the experience, the community experience, is something that could get very much lost online. And so there's a lot of questions to ask the students. Where did you most have a connection with students? So a lot of it was the extracurricular, like my a cappella group. But when we create group activities for students, how to make the engagement better with students. I think one of those cards talks about how you have all the students have to, if they have a group project, right? The problem often is when you have a group and there's a few floaters, right? So 2 people are actually doing all the work and the others are floating. But if you have all of them have to sign on it later, they actually have to read through it because their name is on it. If you give each one a part, or one of them presents, or each one presents a part of it. So there are different ways to make the experience of group work. Even online, we had, in the medical school, we had really good online group experiences where teams actually got really close because they had very good instructions for group work. So those are the 5 categories.
אמרת באמת חור בשקפים, אמרת שעדיף שם על תעודת זהות בכניסה של האתר.
כן.
תעודת זהות וסיסמה, אבל כאילו הכל הולך לכיוון של פרסונליזציה, אז השם זה נראה לי משהו כל כך קריטי.
כן.
כאילו אתה רוצה את זה שאתה רוצה שבן אדם ירגיש את השם שלו למעלה איפשהו, מכל הכיוונים, מכל המובנים, אז כאילו, אז למה היית מורידה את ה...
שאלה טובה. אני מבחינת חברת משתמש לשים פחות קטגוריות למלא. אני חושבת שיש לנו אופציה לשים או שם אימייל וסיסמה. Keith, do you remember at Harvard what is you could put the Harvard ID, you put the Harvard ID in your password, but you could do XID with your email and password?
Most of them are email and password now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I graduated in May, and Keith is still a student. So it's been a few months. So a lot of them are email and password.
אולי מתוך תעודת זהות זה פשוט איזה מי נכנס.
תעודת סטודנט, תעודת זהות של הסטודנט. כאילו המספר זהות של הסטודנט. Yeah. אנחנו מעודדים גם, אנחנו מאוד מעודדים we encourage the students to build a profile with a picture and to put as much information on them. So that's one of the community cards. So really put an emphasis on that. Also in the opening, at the beginning of the class, we also have questions and encouraging them to answer this icebreakers. So a few tips of how to make the icebreakers. What are the general questions and how to ask questions that are more relevant to the course, but how to ask students how to encourage them to look at other people's responses to questions and to motivate them to respond on other people's comments. One of the courses that I took, we were not graded on our participation in terms of you participate great or not, but the amount of participating. So we had to have some participation in every course on the community forum. So if someone has a question, you feel obligated to answer something, and you don't want to answer something stupid because you don't want people to think that about you, and when you go into the job field. So there is that encouragement to interact between students and the personalization to make it more personal by having a profile, by having a picture on your profile. Some people don't have to have their picture; they put a photo of their dog if they want to stay private, for example. But that's something that happens too.
I have another question. I'm trying to think about our customers, our audience, and I'm having a trouble to identify because we're online and most of our courses are global, or even if it's not global, it's open for everyone. And like in a course that's running right now, we have people in all ages from different backgrounds and interests, and it's very hard for me to aim to a specific audience. So what would you recommend us to do?
Yeah. So the answer from the entrepreneurship course at MIT, we would encourage people when you build a product, you want to focus on one user. It says it's kind of trying to catch a few rabbits never works. We don't have a lot of rabbits in this room. I'm trying to think. A few birds. Right? So the encouragement is to focus on find the main user. So at MIT we had also a lot of users when I interviewed the ones online. We had older people. I invited those who were local to come and meet our group, and one of them was actually not our user, even though he took our course. And I wanted him to come in just so that the team would know that we have users that are totally not the user, because he just gave us a lot of feedback. He's like, I want more text. I prefer to have it in a book, actually. We're like, great, you are not our user. You're still taking our course. So when we did all those interviews, we found a common denominator of who is the main demographic that's, and then we focus on them. And the concept in business, we call it a beachhead market.
A what?
A beachhead market.
Okay.
So when you want to conquer an island, you conquer the beach first. And then you start expanding. And it's the same thing in business. If you have a product, you find who is your main user. You make something really good for that user, and then
others will follow.
Others will follow and learn those patterns. But also, once you make something really good for one user, you're able to expand to other users better. So it's good for your own structure to focus. For the designer, when the designer is thinking, okay, I had an entrepreneurship course back in the days where I tried to make we tried to make a product of a clothing line, an online clothing line, and we said it's going to be great for mid-20s, early 30s. And then we're like, well, we could also make baby products, so it's all the same line. And then we're like, well, we could also make it for old people. And we started scattering all over, and we really didn't get anybody at the end. So even though you'd eventually, Amazon, let's say, would eventually reach also older people and also younger people, it's right now focusing on who is their main user. I know it sounds a little bit difficult, especially in education, because you want to reach everybody. But the best way for designing a product is really doing a lot of interviews to find who is the most user, and then building for the other users and adding all those add-ons.
In our case, we suggest to use the data on the different platforms and maybe the average learner, or thinking about our target audience and working on data and not from the data perspective, because we use the courses to students, but if you look at edX or Coursera, the average age is about approximately 29, 30. So it's different from Tau students.
Right.
So which route would you recommend to focus on? The one that we aim as our main target audiences, or the practice the people that actually use
Okay. First of all, I'm not the expert. I'm telling you what I learned from other people, but I often would hear the answer, who is the paying user?
Right.
Who is the paying user? Example, the American Girl doll, right? Does anyone know the American Girl? That was a big sensation. It still is in America. These huge dolls that are designed like she's a doll. Her name is Missy. She grew up in Czechoslovakia, and she has a clothes. And there's a story about Missy. And when a child buys Missy, the child learns the history of Czechoslovakia through the doll. So the user is the 5-year-old who buys the doll. The buying customer is the parents. So you design it first for the paying customer, because when you have the paying customer, then you're able to expand more and specify more.
Again, none of the people are paying customers, so
no, but it's true. I choose.
But the students,
the students do pay.
Students are captive audience. No.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't believe that they're captive.
Even though they're captive, they have the
They learn
time
here,
to
but-
learn and not to learn. They can be engaging or not, and that's what you want to get.
It was
They can read the summary on Facebook on all of our courses.
By the final master.
Yeah.
Can you give more examples of differences between the different age groups?
Difference between the different age groups, like the 16-year-olds and the college students. Well, definitely the college students had a bigger sense of commitment. For example, they would just in asking them to respond to me, the Harvard undergraduate students who I interviewed, so they're, how old would they be? 20, right? So they're in their 20s. They would respond to my email. The 16-year-olds would not. You can see that they opened the email because they could get the analytics, but responding is way beyond them. Other examples.
Can you approach them in other ways?
Right, so you find ways to reach them.
WhatsApp, Snapchat, I don't know what they're using right now.
So my research was not as wide as I'd like it to be, but I actually just went to schools and I went to, so they're the projects in Cambridge, so the development, and they have projects for them. So I spoke with their instructors and I was able to physically come in there. I tried to wear something colorful and look cool. I sat on the table and I tried to
reach those kids.
I started with a cool video. But I first of all taught them
And they
things.
were probably like,
Oh my god, there was one guy who was like this big black guy who was like kind of like not, he's like, I don't care, like as I walk in he's like, oh no, and he's like with his phone and I forgot his name, but he eventually was the most engaged user at the end. He was like I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna show you how to make the best product. So I started with the you, right, talking about you, what would be helpful for you. So I first asked them, what are you working on? What are your passions? What are your challenges? And then I started bringing information that could be helpful for them. And then I was like, well, I could actually get your feedback. You could see how to do this for real. So that's how I got to them, but it was not through emails. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of more differences. Do you have any specific questions of differences? Yeah.
אני רוצה להוסיף משהו קטן.
כן.
אמרת שאתם מנתחים לפי הממוצע גילאים, כאילו יש גם איזושהי פרספקטיבה וכן הלאה. אני חושבת שזה לא ממוצע גילאים, בשלב הזה שאנחנו מחטטים פנימה יותר, זה הלוג. התנהגות, זאת אומרת, באמת אחרי הרבה רשומים, ואז מפספסת את זה בנושא של ההמרה, פשוט לראות מי מהם, כאילו לקחת ממוצע הגילאים של המשתמש יותר.
מי שמשתמש ונשאר משתמש
נשאר.
גם.
active learner as well.
זה משנה את הממוצע גילאים.
ואצלנו באמת אפשר לראות את כל מיני שלבים של אקטיב, זאת אומרת של מי שסיים, מי ששילם, כל מיני רמות של אקטיביות.
להתחיל להסתכל עליהם אחרת לגמרי.
לפעמים, sometimes you could also get the teacher to give them, to do a play of give them some sort of credit for responding. So one of the schools, a very good school in Cambridge that I went to, the Cambridge Rindenland School, it's a very good school, and I came and I did the presentation, and the teacher was like, wow, this is a really great field for our media class, for our media and design class and our computer science class. And she just like built with me a project where the students would take it as homework and compare it to other sites that they like to watch, and they had to write an assignment, and they got credit for it. But they also felt like they're actually helping something from, the real world. And so it was exciting for them, but sometimes it could also get the students to, so I think their incentive, even though they're only 16, they're already thinking about life. And the incentive is like, you're helping a real company. And so you know what working with a real company is. But also giving them some sort of credit, the fact that, it's part of their homework assignment, or at Harvard, sometimes you have to take a survey at the end to finish your class. So having it as a requirement is sometimes they just, if it's a multi-question, they sometimes just click the same.
Yeah.
But that's just statistics we have to work with. And try to make the questionnaire more engaging and pictures and all that. Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? So maybe to finish up, we can show you an example or two of our
Please.
newest courses. Just
Yeah. Come on up.
yeah. Sure.